This is a reading from the Autobiography of Maria Valtorta. But if Jesus has listened to me regarding many things, regarding this one he did not. From 1918 to the present day, many other wars have slain the sons of Italy, and perhaps I shall die while the most tremendous of these wars is taking place. 1919. A few days after the end of the war, St. Mark's Hospital closed, and I moved on to another hospital alongside my wounded men, whom I did not wish to abandon. It was in the building of the G. Giusti Gymnasium Lycée on Caducci Street, or perhaps the other way around. I know I passed in front of the Basilica of the Annunciation, under the arch connecting the Holy Innocents Hospital to other buildings, and then I walked a good distance along that street, passing in front of the Etruscan Egyptian Museum, and so on. One half of the hospital was attractive, in the new building, but the other was ugly and gloomy, formerly a cloistered house. High, narrow little windows, almost prison-like, dreary cloisters and courtyards, admonitions sculpted on the arches of the doors, water clocks, owls, skulls, and stairs, ramps, steps, constant differences in level which put my poor, breathless heart sorely to the test. At the beginning of January, after a second bout with Spanish influenza, I couldn't take it any more. I had myself examined first by a certain doctor, and then by the chief physician at my hospital. With the former I told a fib. I said I was an orphan, and wanted to know my condition in all frankness so as to be able to give an answer to a young man who wanted to marry me. I needed to know the exact situation, and he told me. With the latter, I could not tell this fib because I knew He knew I had father and mother, but that fine man, also a father, and not happy in his family, had intuited many things, and was very paternal with me. After having examined me carefully, he told me that what he thought, which corresponded to all the other had said. The miracle had taken place of two doctors who, without mutual knowledge, said the same thing. Afterwards, the chief physician wanted to speak to my mother. Note that I had gone to the examinations alone, because I could no longer carry on that way, and mother did not see my condition, and would not admit it if I told her. I do not know what he told her. What I do know is that she came back home in very low spirits, and for some time was quite tender. But the treatment did not improve my health. My heart was getting wearier and wearier. Insomnia also tormented me. Perhaps it proceeded from my heart's constant, marked palpitation, which, when I lay down at night, increased. But I had no fear of death. Rather, I would have wanted only to see my sisters and my companions again. I felt that if I could visit the school for a time, as did my classmates, the final agitations would die out in a supernatural peace. I had always understood this, even in the most disturbed moments, and had continually wished to take refuge in that nest of peace, to rediscover peace. But I had never even tried to say so to mother, who had already opposed my correspondence with sisters. Now that I felt myself dying, I wished for it even more. Among other things, I told myself that once there, if they were to keep me as a teacher, I might even end up becoming a nun. I now looked to God a great deal again, and would have wished to take shelter from everything forever in a convent and in a nun's habit. I still did not see the will of God clearly. I already perceived that he was constantly attracting me, drawing me to himself, but I was mistaken in thinking he wanted me in a convent. This was an addition arising from my own desire. The convent, like death, would have freed me from all the family struggles. Exhausted by all I had suffered, I desired this alone, to leave the world in one way or another, so as to suffer no longer. But on the contrary, I had to remain in the world and suffer immensely more. I was forced to abandon my hospital work because I simply could not bear it any more. I detached myself from my lads, all condemned to fatal illnesses, with great sorrow. In May, my cousin Clotilde came to Florence with her 8-year-old son. They arrived from Reggio Calabria. She had recently lost a very young son tragically, and the other, who was now an only child, was afflicted with mastoiditis, at least so it seemed. They had referred him to Florence to get the opinion of department heads at the Meyer Children's Hospital. I knew the chief physician very well and set to work. Fortunately, the supposed mastoiditis was nothing but an inflamed sublingual gland. A little 3 centimeter incision, 20 days in the hospital, no scar, and it was all over. But I spent those 20 days there alongside the little surgery patient and his mother, who loved me very much and understood me even better because, as a relative, she knew my mother's character, and so, even if I did not speak, she understood so many things just the same. She also wanted to speak to the physician who was treating me, and since he told her that the best thing to assist the treatment was to get me out of the family environment, the prime cause of my ailments and a constant source of disturbances capable of aggravating my condition, she took action in this regard. My cousin Clotilde spoke boldly to Mother. My cousin Clotilde is outspoken and not afraid of anyone. This is her cousin Clotilde in 1908 with her firstborn son, Luigi, also known as Gigi. She is a Piedmontese of integrity. Some say she is not good. Perhaps. She has suffered much, and this has altered her nervous system. But she was always good and maternal to me, and I did live with her for 2 years. This is cousin Clotilde and her son Guglielmo Memmo, photographed in Venice in 1922. So, my cousin told Mother to entrust her to me. We would first go to Turin, her native city, and then she would take me to Monza, to my sisters. Mother yielded. Reluctantly, of course, in telling my cousin where to get off, but she yielded. She wrote to the superior, and on receiving word that I was expected, we left for Turin. Those were wonderful days. In addition to the city, Clotilde took me to Racconigi, Stupinigi, Moncalieri, Superga, and so on. Being with her and her child amidst so much care made me improve immediately, an improvement which is more moral than physical, but which contributed to giving me a less wasted appearance. After a while we left for Monza. In Turin I had received a very affectionate letter from my superior, written with effort, for she had very serious heart trouble, but overflowing with love. She said the sisters and she were waiting me with longing. I was happy after so many years. I would see my school, my sisters again, and experience one more for a month or two, perhaps forever, that calm, ordered, devout life. I would see my companions again, some already married and with children, some single like me. I had advised all of them. But could I ever be happy? It is not for nothing that my name is Maria, a name involving predestination, but also pain. According to the etymology of my name, I too had to be myrrh of the sea and bitter sea. I thus had to find pain, even where, in view of the fact that a thing or a place was ever so licit and holy, I would presumably find a bit of joy. Arriving in Monza on the evening of June 10th, I immediately went to the school. What a thrill of joy and emotion when I rang at that large main door! What a wave of memories when I crossed that threshold and found myself in the courtyard of honor, and penetrated into the reception room. What emotion when I heard the steps of a sister approaching, marked by the slight tinkling of her long rosary. Even now, when the window is open and sisters pass by, or you come, I at once perceive the sound of the rosary hanging at the waist, and think of my sisters. First of all, the assistant superior came. She greeted me, a bit cold, to tell the truth, but she had never been outgoing, and I paid no attention. Then my poor superior came, panting and swollen from her heart trouble. She was most affectionate, as always. The assistant superior advised me that there were no beds at the school, and that I would have to go to sleep at the residence of the sisters devoted to serving the cathedral. Monza has a mitred archpriest and a chapter, as if it were the seat of a curia. As my cousin observed, it would really have been better for me to have stayed at the school, where I was known. A letter had been written for this express purpose many days before, to learn if it was possible to put me up, paying my way, of course. But, provided I could be near the sisters, I accepted all the conditions. I took leave of Clotilde and Mimino and remained at the school. I saw no other sister. After about half an hour, someone was instructed to take me to the little convent where I would sleep. The sisters there welcomed me with much kindness, apologizing for having to give me a room which was not modern, and what did I care? I was in fact taken back to a vast room whose furniture must have harked back to Radetzky and the 5 days of 1848. There was a bed so high that to retire I had to take a chair and turn it into a kind of ladder in order to climb up there, asking my angel not to let me fall while asleep. But the fact is, I was at Monza with the sisters. Everything else meant nothing alongside this joy. I did not have dinner, for beginning at that time I ate very little. I just sipped a cup of coffee which my doctor had ordered to sustain my heart, and I retired, and slept as well until the bells of the cathedral, very close by, awakened me to the Ave Maria. I came down from my catafalque, got dressed very quickly, and went to hear Mass. I did not receive communion because I did not find a confessor, but I promised myself I would do so the following morning at school. I would organize my life better during the day. I sipped another coffee for breakfast and headed for the school. I was quite familiar with Monza, and thus had no need to be accompanied. I rang, entered, and was shown into the hall. I waited and waited and waited. No one ever came. 9:30, the assistant superior finally appeared. Serious, I would say almost gruff, she asked me if I had slept well and had had breakfast. Then she immediately began a long discourse centering on, "You well know the rules. We should not create precedents," and so forth. The conclusion was, "We don't want you here." I observed we had written in advance that the rules themselves welcomed former students wishing to spend some time in residence at the school while paying their own way, that I was therefore not creating a precedent, but following the traditional customs of over half a century, that I did not have a contagious disease. I had brought the diagnoses and medical prescriptions with me, that I had not caused talk, and was thus not a cause for scandal, and that finally I was now there, and my cousin had left for Bologna, and it would be necessary to let me stay until she returned, at least until then. There was nothing to be done. The sister was inexorable. She replied that I was not a child, but 22 years old, and could travel alone. I begged her to let me stay at least until I could greet my companions, who were to come during the week. Not a word. I again begged that I be permitted at least to telephone those who were in Monza, who would gladly accommodate me for a few days. They had invited me so often. Not a word. I had to leave. In the face of such unexplainable relentlessness, such harshness rejecting me, I bowed my head. I wept. Another dream cherished for so many years which dissolved when I thought it would come true. The assistant superior asked me if I wanted to visit the church. What a question! I would say what a stupid question if I did not still respect the one who asked it. She took me to our beautiful chapel. The figure of the Sacred Heart extended its arms to me from the main altar. There was only the figure and the sister who was the organist, sitting at her organ in the choir and reviewing a sung mass. I took refuge near the altar and wept and wept and wept, until the assistant superior returned to tell me that my cousin had come back. Clotilde, a woman expert in observing human faces, she has a large hotel, and at hotels people become real masters in the art of recognizing character, had not trusted the assistant's honeyed words that evening before, and had stayed in Monza another day. As soon as she saw me, she said forcefully, as is her custom, "My dear, you must resign yourself. The sisters don't want you. I'm sorry for your sake, but what can you do?" "Do you think so, madam? We would like to have her, but you well understand." "I understand that you don't want her. It would have been more correct, though, to have written at once, or at least to have said so openly last night. If I had left, trusting that everything was in order, you would have put her on the train alone, in a time of strikes, and with heart trouble. And she said to me, 'Come on, let's go. You shouldn't stay where you're not wanted.'" The assistant grasped that she had acted badly, and insisted on my remaining, as an extraordinary concession, until the evening to have me see the sisters. Note that I had not yet seen them. In the meantime, she said, she would take care of advising my companions in Monza. She said so, but did not do so, fearing they might detain me. Clotilde yielded. I thus stayed until 5 p.m. but I think a dangerous delinquent or some plague-stricken person would not have been kept differently from the way I was, at the end of the garden, all day, except when it was time for lunch, which was served to me in a remote little room. Eat I did not. I could not. Sadness formed a knot. I took a roll as a souvenir, and kept it until a few years ago. It had gotten worm-eaten, and I threw it away. Father Christopher, in the Betrothed, keeps the bread of forgiveness in his monk's basket. For over 20 years I have borne the bread of rejection with me. My sisters did not eat that day to keep me company. They did not approve of the way of acting of the very powerful assistant superior, who had been doing and undoing at her pleasure, since the superior had become virtually dazed by her illness, but they could do nothing. The superior came, blowing like a pair of bellows, to apologize. She wept. The poor woman, she was now broken. I never felt rancor towards her, but I would be lying if I said I did not have a very bitter feeling towards the assistant superior. She is now dead, and death puts an end to everything. I hope that God has also forgiven her for this harshness with me, but it certainly cannot be said that she showed me charity. You will agree as well. How the course of my movement towards God could have been facilitated if I had been able to pause there, but it does not matter. I can joyfully state that I owe what I have become to myself alone, with no contribution from the environment and common life of the brides of Christ. Jesus has worked my soul himself, alone, and I have responded and requested his working in me. I bless Mario and my wounds for having given me the initial push, but afterwards I must give all the praise to God alone, and a bit of approval to my own soul, which after once starting out, kept going faster and faster. However great the anxiety of my heart, your consolations soothe me. Psalm 94, verse 19. I went back home so sad and discouraged that I ended up getting sick. I could really say even the sparrow has found a home, the swallow a nest to place its young. Footnote 1, Psalm 84, verse 4. But I find no dwelling to suffer my torment in peace. And then, disheartened about everything and everyone, after having said, in my dismay, every man is deceitful. Footnote 2, Psalm 116, B2. I turned my wounded flight towards God. I must acknowledge that more than one flight was a flutter, proceeding by hops, but the fact is that it was already movement towards Jesus. If I had risen from the thick slime 2 years before, if I had let myself be dragged before the altar a year before, because I was ashamed to go there frequently on my own, there is no moment worse than when conscience reawakens. Whether it's the devil or whatever else, we are led to exaggerate our guilt, to deem it unforgivable, to draw away from God out of shame, instead of throwing ourselves at his feet and humbly saying, Lord, save me, for I have sinned. Lord, cleanse me, for I am leprous. Lord, remember me in your kingdom. If before I had acted only in that way, so little and so badly under the new painful blow, I found the strength to move on my own, like a weary horse under the whip lashing him. Let the wicked man abandon his way, and the evil one his thoughts. Let him turn back to Yahweh, who will take pity on him, to our God, for he is rich in forgiveness. Footnote 3, Isaiah 55, verse 7. I shall look for the lost one, bring back the stray, bandage the injured, and make the sick strong. I shall watch over the fat and healthy. I shall be a true shepherd to them. Footnote 4, Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 16. Don't these words seem to have been written for me, and for all the poor souls that are sick, as mine was? Limping along, I dragged myself towards the Lord, and, rich in his mercy, he bound my fractured members, refreshed me in my weakness, and set me upon his lap for me to sleep in softness and warmth, for I was utterly wounded, and there was no one else to love me, and I had to get better to serve him, and follow him, and imitate him, and love him in the immense, full, complete, free, and intense light of an absolute love with no more dissipation, coldness, or returning to the human. Mother and anyone else could now push me around. I would still suffer, that's natural, but every suffering, instead of drawing me away from God by almost making him to blame for that pain, would pull me closer and closer to God, for I now knew that He alone loved me, that He alone sought my good, that only goodness came to me from Him, and that evil was given exclusively by creatures. Every pain has been a hammer blow which has further pounded in the nails, joining me to the cross of Christ. And if it is a cross, I would not on that account accept any royal bed in place of it, for it is the bed for the soul's marriage to Christ, just as suffering, according to Ruysbroek, is Christ's wedding garment. As you will have noted, many of the bridges uniting me to creatures had been broken, and many of my branches reaching out to embrace other trees had been cut off. God was working to isolate me, to have me entirely for Himself. Only one bridge remained, my friendship for Mario. It was very dear to my heart. The young man kept insisting on his intentions, and I on mine. But the more I persisted in telling him that I was no longer capable of loving in the sense this word has for most people, the more he persisted in replying that he did not care if I did not love him as a husband. It was enough for me to let myself be loved by him. Afterwards, my love would gradually come. Did I remember Roberto? That was just fine. He also remembered him. He would name the first child after him. Was I sad? No problem. He would take care of making me so happy that I would necessarily become glad. Was I ill? That was of no import. His love would heal me by dint of tenderness, for in the end I was sick because I was too abandoned. And here he was right. In October I had to undergo a real siege. I kept saying no, though such affection began to shake and to penetrate me. The colonel joined forces with his son to make me capitulate. One day he told me that Mario needed to leave at ease in order to take calmly the last exams, which were now close, and that the time had come to put an end to my mother's absurd vetoes. It was not right for me to sacrifice myself to her imaginary fears. He also reproached me, though very gently, saying that I was exaggerating about my mother's intransigence. I was startled by her like a horse. I went on saying, "Wait, hold on." I was afraid. I remembered the scene of January 5th, 1914, and I did not want it to be repeated. But Mario took no heed of me. With the haste of those in love, one morning on November 3rd, 1919, to be exact, taking advantage of being alone with Mother, he spoke out. An outright proposal. Heavens above! Mario was not torn to pieces because he was much bigger than Mother, but he came close. As I had foreseen, he was invited never to set foot in our house again. In the afternoon, the colonel caught up with me in the street while I was walking my dog. I was very sad because I had had to suffer one reproach after another, and because I thought this friendship had also been destroyed. The colonel was quite disgusted, and spoke his mind forthrightly. I was sorry to see him so upset, but he was thus convinced as to whether or not I was exaggerating. He told me that in any event, he regarded me as his son's fiancé, unless I absolutely refused. In that case, he would have to say that I too was deceitful, like my mother, for I had always led Mario to believe that in time I would finally be his, whereas I instead wanted to make a fool of him as my mother did in the most deliberate fashion. This was not true. I had always explained my views to Mario and his father, but affliction sometimes makes people say what is not so, and the colonel was deeply grieved. He begged me not to insist on my refusal, telling me that I would one day thank him for such persistence on his part, for with Mario I would be happy. He said, my very faithful friendship was the best preparation for a faithful love, and if I was not to have the giddiness of a passionate love, I would surely have the great gift of constancy over time, which would be ever the same in intensity and tenderness. Loves based on friendship are the ones destined to last the longest, my dear. Habit does not ruin them, nor does old age extinguish them. They are loves which withstand all trials and all events. Neither age, nor the fading of physical graces, and the appearance in their place of moral defects proper to ripe age and beyond touches them. Friendship, when true, is not susceptible of any diminishment, and Mario's is true, for not only has it lasted for years and years, but has always asserted itself more and more, and has offered the finest evidence of being a source of goodness. If his son had become so worthy, it was because he had made me the goal of all his work, study, and effort to improve himself. What other greater proof than this did I want? Where would I ever find another capable of loving me that way for my soul, which had become tied to his from early youth in such a pure and constant bond as that of faithful friendship? And I, too, a poor goose who thought I did not love him, Mario, loved him with the truest love, to the point that the thought of losing him caused me such deep affliction. I was just hesitant, blinded by fear of mother, with 100 scruples going from the idea of offending the memory of the deceased Roberto to that of being too sick to make a man happy. I should put myself at rest about Robert. All we needed was for every woman who lost her sweetheart to condemn herself to perpetual sacrifice. With respect to my health, before giving his full assent to his son, he had asked the physician looking after me, and had received the most complete assurance that my illness was due to nervous exhaustion more than anything else, the result of all I had suffered and continued to suffer. Once happy in my own home, alongside a husband who really loved me, I would be thoroughly cured. The colonel was eloquent, and he always spoke so little. In the end, he told me to get advice from other people as well, whom I trusted, before totally refusing. I did so. At bottom, I also felt that the former friendship had changed into a deeper affection. The sun manages to warm up even glaciers when it is continuous, and Mario had for years now been warming my numbed heart with all the most delicate industry of true love. But, before yielding, I turned to 3 persons: a Jesuit priest who knew Mario and me very well, a woman who was friendly with the 2 of us, possessed of a profound, true, and perfect religiosity, and aware of all my mother's ideas and their detrimental consequences for me, and a senator, an emeritus jurist, first president of the Supreme Court of Cassation, a husband, father, grandfather, and exemplary citizen, an upright conscience, a balanced mind, and a heart open to love like no other I had found. He was fond of me, and often preferred to go out with me rather than with his grandchildren, whom he said were too modern, that is, too thoughtless. This senator also knew Mario, since he had encountered him with us. Well then, all 3, the priest, the elderly devout lady, and the good senator jurist, exhorted me to accept this love without fear of mother's excommunications, and they all adduced arguments to whose correctness there should be no objection. I still remained uncertain for a few days, praying and meditating a great deal on what to do, and then I decided. I accepted. The colonel called me daughter, and promised me he would take care of putting mother in her place with her selfish ideas. I've won so many battles in my long career as a soldier who has taken part in 3 wars. You will see how I win this one, too. Love each other more and more. Write to each other now as an engaged couple. The mail will come here to me, or to Paola, if you prefer, since you're next-door neighbors. In the spring, Mario will be an officer, and then we'll undertake the open-field battle and win. Mario was happy. I was practically shaking in my shoes, but I would be lying if I said I was not content. I thought I would soon have a house of my own, where I could live and thrive again in peace, without always being oppressed by my mother's despotism. And then I would have children. Oh, the children! The appeal which moved me, the strongest of all, was the children. The idea of having my own babies, to whom I could give all the affection I had not had, to make them ever so happy. We wrote each other every week. Mario's letters overflowed with love. Mine were cooler. The habit of treating him as a friend survived in me, but I felt that my thirsty heart was gradually warming up day by day. Mother, convinced she had put down that fellow, had not persisted in prohibiting that he write, and I answer, but this measured, official correspondence, the only one which appeared, was nothing but the accompaniment of low notes for the blaring hymn of love Mario was singing in his letters, which I shall call unofficial, private, and which now nourished my heart with life-giving solace. I prayed a lot that everything would go well in the end, that the good Lord would touch my mother's heart. Yes, I prayed a lot. I prayed as nearly all mortals do, asking God to do our will, by giving us what we asked for. In truth, we were not asking for dishonest things, but sometimes the good Lord judges it fitting not to give us even honest things. Happy are those who in this case manage to say, Thy will be done. And most happy are those who, even before asking God for something, always say, Lord, you act. I ask for nothing. May thy will alone reign and work. I had not yet gone so far. I still had to soak myself in weeping, much weeping, before coming to annul my human personality in God, to the point of asking only for his love, and that he would use me as he thought best. When I arrived at that, I would find perfect tranquility, for, as St. Catherine of Siena says, whoever conforms himself to God's will finds peace. The winter passed that way. I was improving a bit because I now strove diligently to improve, to make Mario, who loved me so much, happy. On January 24th, 1920, Mario came on leave. He made only a few visits, reserved beyond measure so as not to incite further maternal wrath, but he found a way, on neutral ground, in the house of the woman friend of us both, to speak to me, not as a friend, but as a fiancé, a single conversation and a single kiss, an honest, dear conversation and a chaste, most chaste kiss. They were our viaticum for the battles now close at hand. Mario went back to his studies, I might say to his final exams at that point. I approached, unaware, a misfortune which was the source of other misfortunes. I was beginning to be really well. I still had much palpitation of the heart, but had gained weight and recovered energy. The physician was content. This is a picture of Maria Valtorta at the age of 22 and a half, a few months before the spinal fracture.